April 12th, 1943. A cold morning inside a roaring aircraft plant on Long Island. Outside, engines are being run up until the whole building trembles. Inside, rivet guns chatter like angry insects. Under the belly of a half-finished bomber, a young inspector stands alone with nothing but a pencil and a clipboard. Her hands shake, not because she's scared of the factory, but because she can't stop picturing what happens when a plane built here meets a cloud bank at 20,000 feet with flak bursting nearby. Somewhere overseas, crews are already climbing into aircraft that look exactly like this, trusting strangers they'll never meet. The American war machine is at full surge. New factories, new shifts, new faces, people pulled from farms, shops, schools, anywhere hands can be found. Bombers are rolling out faster than anyone thought possible. And that speed feels like victory. But then the reports start to whisper something ugly. Crashes during test flights, engines failing for no clear reason, wings showing stress where they shouldn't, aircraft dropping out of clear skies with pilots who didn't even have time to radio a warning. Investigators blame rushed training, new workers, bad luck, even just the cost of doing business at wartime pace. And for a while, that explanation is comforting, because the alternative is terrifying, because the alternative is this: what if it is an accident? What if someone is helping those planes fail? Here's where the story gets strange, and why you should watch till the end. A rumour that's been told and retold says this inspector, often named Beatrice Tilly Schilling, did something so simple it sounded childish. And yet it cracked open an entire mystery. She ran a pencil along seams and joints the way a musician runs fingers along piano keys. The pencil should glide smoothly. Instead, it dipped. Again. And again. Tiny gaps. Crooked bolts. Parts that didn't match the drawings. The pencil line didn't just mark metal, it marked intent. And when she wouldn't stop using the test, the story claims she uncovered 18 sabotaged aircraft and forced a shutdown that saved hundreds of lives. Now let's be honest, because this matters. That pencil test that exposed 18 sabotaged planes circulates online in dramatic form, but the specifics are hard to pin down in official verifiable records the way you can with famous battles or named operations. What is absolutely real, though, is the world that makes the story believable. Wartime factories were under enormous pressure, quality problems were real, and sabotage fears were real, on both sides of the Atlantic. What's also real is that there was a Beatrice Schilling, and her true story is every bit as cinematic as the legend. And the twist is this: the most famous single line she drew didn't stop a bomber from being sabotaged in New York. It helped stop fighter pilots from dying in the sky. So let me take you to the kind of moment that makes engineers go quiet. Summer 1940. A British fighter pilot in a Hurricane or Spitfire has finally latched onto a German fighter's tail. He's close enough to see the enemy's silhouette twitch in and out of cloud. He pushes the nose down to follow, and instantly his engine coughs, stutters, and dies for a heartbeat that feels like a lifetime. The German pilot doesn't even need to outshoot him. He simply does a negative G maneuver, a quick bunt into a dive, and the British fighter can't follow because the engine cuts out at the worst possible time. In air combat, one heartbeat can be the difference between a kill and a funeral. The problem wasn't bravery, it wasn't pilot skill, it was fuel delivery. Many German fighters used fuel injection, which keeps feeding the engine even under negative G. Many British fighters used carburetors, and under negative G the fuel system could flood in a way that starved the engine of the right mixture. So German pilots had a nasty little advantage. When chased, they could dip into negative G and watch the pursuer's engine falter. British pilots learned to roll inverted before diving, an awkward workaround when bullets are already in the air. Back at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough, engineers were reading the same combat reports again and again. Engine cut out in dive. Temporary power loss. Enemy escaped. Every report carried the same implication. Someone was going to die if this wasn't fixed quickly. That's where Beatrice Tilly Schilling enters the story for real. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a politician. She was an engineer with grease under her nails and a mind that refused to accept that's just how it is. And she understood something that changes everything. You don't always need a complicated solution to beat a complicated problem. Sometimes you need one precise restriction in exactly the right place. She designed a simple restrictor. Think of it like a carefully sized washer with a hole that controlled fuel flow so the carburetor wouldn't flood under -G. The elegance was brutal. Small part, huge consequence. The kind of fix that makes people angry because it's so obvious after the fact. But it wasn't obvious before, and that's why it mattered. She wasn't just drawing a line. She was choosing a dimension. She was deciding what size that opening had to be so the engine would keep breathing when a pilot pushed the aircraft into the violent, unplanned movements of combat. And she didn't stop at a design on paper. In one of the most vivid images of wartime problem-solving, she and a small team went out to operational units and got the modification fitted as quickly as possible. Because pilots didn't need a perfect long-term redesign next year. They needed something that worked right now, this week, before the next sortie. The device became a lifesaver, and pilots gave it a nickname that was crude, affectionate, and unforgettable. Miss Schilling's Orifice. It's the kind of nickname only fighter pilots can invent. Half joke, half gratitude, and completely honest about what saved them. If you're still with me, here's the hook inside the hook. This is the same emotional core as that factory pencil story. Whether the setting is a bomber plant in America or a research workshop in England, the hero isn't a person firing a gun. It's a person refusing to accept small imperfections as normal. Because in war, small imperfections don't stay small. A hairline gap becomes a fracture. A wrong bolt becomes a failed joint. A fuel surge becomes an engine cutout, and an engine cutout becomes a burning wreck in a field. Now imagine the pressure behind that. In a factory, supervisors are screaming for quotas. The nation is demanding planes. Everyone is exhausted. A young inspector who slows down a line can be treated like an enemy, even when she's trying to save lives. In a research establishment, an engineer who insists on changing a system can be told she's wasting time, that pilots should adapt, that production can't be disrupted. In both places, the easiest thing to do is stay quiet, sign the papers, and go home. The hard thing, the rare thing, is to be the person who says, "No, this isn't right," and keeps saying it until someone listens. That's why these stories land so hard. They force you to realize how much of war is decided by people you never see. Not the famous generals, not the aces with painted victory marks, but inspectors, mechanics, engineers, drivers, and workers who hold a line against chaos with nothing but attention to detail. And sometimes the only weapon they have is a pencil. So what about sabotage? Could enemy agents really tamper with aircraft? Sabotage did happen in wartime industry in different forms, sometimes politically motivated, sometimes criminal, sometimes simply bitterness mixed with opportunity. On the other side of the lines, forced labourers sometimes sabotaged German production in tiny, dangerous ways, risking death to save Allied airmen they would never meet, even without dramatic spy rings. The fear of sabotage was constant because it only takes one hidden defect to bring down a plane. And that fear changes behaviour. It makes inspectors look closer, makes engineers demand better tolerances, makes commanders ask uncomfortable questions when another aircraft falls out of the sky. Now let's connect it back to that opening scene under the bomber. The most chilling part isn't the pencil itself, it's what the pencil represents. The pencil is a lie detector for a machine. It's proof that the war isn't only fought at the front. It's fought in measurements, in tolerances, in whether a seam is flush, in whether a fuel system behaves the same upside down as it does right side up. The people who win those invisible fights rarely get statues, but they change outcomes all the same. And here's why you should watch till the very end of this kind of story. The single line that saves lives is almost never a miracle. It's usually the result of someone paying attention longer than everyone else and refusing to be bullied by the urgency of the moment. Beatrice Schilling's real legacy wasn't just a clever restrictor. It was the proof that engineering can be combat, and that saving lives can look like a tiny metal part no one notices, until it fails to exist. So the next time you see footage of bombers lifting off in formation, or fighters diving through cloud, remember the unseen chain beneath that image. Remember that every aircraft is a promise signed by hands you will never know. And remember the uncomfortable truth that makes these stories hit. Pilots die when promises are broken, whether by enemy fire, by rushed workmanship, by a hidden defect, or by a system that values speed over correctness. That's why the person with the pencil matters. That's why the engineer with the one simple fix matters. And that's why you should watch till the end, because the real heroes of this war are often the ones who never fired a shot, but refused to let a small mistake become a fatal one.